Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon entitled Creating High-End Color Separations with Mr. Scott Fresener. So let me introduce myself. I'm your host today. My name is Marco Pena with Deco Network America. I'm the Business Development Manager. I've had the pleasure and the honor of doing the hosting for the last few webinars. And today is a really special one. We've got the T-BizNetwork founder and president, Mr. Scott Fresener. Scott, are you with us?
I'm here, yeah. Good to see you, Marco.
Hey, Scott. Likewise, bud. Hey, thanks for being with us. I know you got some really exciting stuff to share with us here, and in just a minute we'll go ahead and get started. But if you don't mind, Scott, just some quick house cleaning tips with all the people attending here. So, folks, we've muted everybody. That's just for the sanity of everybody online. Obviously, there's a lot of background noise if we don't do that, but we understand there's probably going to be tons and tons of questions throughout the webinar. So if you have any questions, if I would, I'd like to point you out to the GoToWebinar control panel. About 3/4 of the way down, there's a section called Questions. And as we go through the webinar, and if you have any questions for Mr. Scott Fresener there, please ask them in that dialog box. And what we'll do is we'll try to get to those questions during the webinar, and certainly at the conclusion of the webinar, there will be some Q&A sessions with Scott. So I'll be asking Scott some of these questions as we go through the webinar. So, Scott, thank you very much for being with us. I know that you travel around the world, you do these presentations, and so we feel very honored to have you with us, and we appreciate the opportunity for you to educate the not only the Deco Network people out there, but everybody out there, and just showing them how to do these color separations. So I know there's a lot of interest. They're done hearing from me. They want to hear from you. So, Scott, I'm going to go ahead and put that in your lap there.
All right, man. Hey, I'm Scott Fresener with T-BizNetwork International, and you can see my email address on my website there. So if you ever want to send me an email, I take questions all the time. Be gentle if I don't get back with you within the same day. But this is going to be on how to do high-end separations. There's a pretty picture of me. That's just to prove that I can screen print. Guys like me that travel around and consult, sometimes people think we don't know how to pull a squeegee, but I've done my million prints, so I think I know what I'm talking about. Quickly, my quick bio, I'll give this to you in about a minute or less. I'm the co-author of How to Print T-Shirts for Fun and Profit, and that's the picture of the revised version of my book that I'm trying to get to the press right now, and will be out in about a month and a half. This book is kind of the Bible and has lots of good stuff if you're new to screening. I developed Fast Films, which is the older brother of T-Seps. I developed Fast Rip, which is for film output, which is now called T-Rip, and I'm the father of the T-Jet. I've done lots of videos. I've traveled the world. I've taught this process, including back in the camera days, which dates me, and I'm a separator. I currently separate about 1,500 jobs per year, so my day is sitting at my computer and doing color separations, and obviously I use T-Seps, and then I put my little spin on it. This webinar is going to be kind of a wham-bam, how to use the program, and this is designed for those of you that maybe aren't familiar with automated separation programs. For those of you that are familiar with Corel and Illustrator, common question I get is, why can't I do this stuff in Corel and Illustrator? And the response is because you can't, because Corel and Illustrator doesn't know what to do with an underbase or a highlight or a black shirt or dot gain. And so T-Seps does all that, and so that's why this program is what you really need. And this program works in Photoshop, which is a pixel-based program. So I'm going to kind of run you through how the program works. T-Seps used to be called Fast Films, and there's about 9,000 users of Fast Films worldwide because the program's in 6 languages. It's a plug-in for Photoshop. So you have to have Photoshop, and it works in any version, including the new CS6 on Mac or PC, Lion, Windows 7, works on anything you've got. T-Seps works in it. It does separations in less than a minute. Now, it's not going to perform miracles, and that's where we all get in trouble. You know, you get that crappy JPEG from the customer, and they think it looks great because they look at it on the monitor, and they're just so blown away, and then you zoom in on it and find out that it's really junky. It's not going to perform miracles, but it might get you close. It does perform miracles on good artwork. It's going to save you hours of preparation time. You know, a comment I hear all the time is, it took you to a new level. You're taking jobs you would have turned down. I hear this all the time. I like to say it does the heavy lifting, because without my program, certainly you could sit at Photoshop if you knew it really well, and you could make the underbase, pull the colors out, figure out, and maybe in 4 or 5 hours have your sets done. So my program does all that in less than 30 seconds. It's really 14 programs in one because it does a lot of different types of separations. So for some of you, this will be new to you. This will be new territory. You're used to Corel and Illustrator, and you're kind of You've opened Photoshop, your eyes glaze over, and you're kind of not sure, gee, why do I need Photoshop? You read all about it, you hear about it. If you can get Photoshop, and in fact, Adobe, if you go to www.adobe.com, you can download a free trial today. I say today because it's Photoshop 6 just was released yesterday, and I think their free trial link is now working today. I mean, you're really on the edge here of Photoshop 6. You can download a free trial of Adobe, Photoshop 6, CS6. You can download TSEPs from tseps.com. And I'll be a nice guy and save you $75 if you use a coupon code of DECOWEB75. And, you know, people always say, well, what separates TSEPs from QuickSeps and Spot Process and the rest of these guys? And all I can tell you is I wrote TSEPs. I'm a great separator, and it's what's under the hood that makes these programs work. And when you call, you get me on the phone. My phone is shut off right now, and people are trying to get me, but you get me on the phone. The question also is, why Photoshop? You know, those of you that are the Corel users and the Illustrator users kind of go, well, I do everything in that. Photoshop is the program of choice. Here's the new CS6 cover, which I think is pretty bizarre, but that is the cover for CS6. They just released that a few days ago. In Photoshop, you can actually build images in what's called layers. And so let me jump you over to Photoshop real quick here. Now this is Photoshop CS4. I have CS6 on my computer and CS5, but I'll tell you in a second why there's a problem with upgrading to CS5 or CS6. Adobe, who doesn't really care as much about screeners as we would think, removed the key button out of CS5 and CS6, and I'll show it to you shortly. And so most of us still stay in CS4, although I have CS6 to make sure TSEPs works in it, but CS4 is where I'm going to be. Now, TSEPs is an automated separation program that kind of sits in what's called the Actions palette. This is the Actions palette. And basically, it's you just push a button and it runs a set of separations. I'm just going to push a button, and we'll see if this whole thing is going to work through the online here. And it's going to say, what file do you want to separate? And I'm just going to pick a file from my computer. And the program pretty much cooks. It's kind of fun to watch because if you blink your eyes, your separations are done. Now it's running a hair slower because we're online here and we're all sharing screens, and so it's not running quite as fast as normal. But it's doing the heavy lifting. And when we're done, we're going to have a complete set of separations ready to print out, put on screens, and make a print. And TSEPs does it all for you. It tells you the mesh count, the print order, the halftone line count. Let's look at this design on, that's the original art, by the way. Let's keep that in mind. Let's look at the design on a black shirt. There's a black shirt. In Photoshop CS4, you must turn on what's called the gamma warning to preview it correctly. And we don't print black ink on a black shirt. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 colors ready to print out on a black shirt. And you'll be a magician when you do this because the customer's going to go, how the heck did you do that? Now, these are called tonal separations, meaning it's spot color, solid ink where I want it to be solid ink, but it's grayscale in certain areas. So this is going to be a combination of solid colors and some halftone dots when I print this thing out. So this is what's called a tonal separation. And I'm running it on a low-res file. You can see some of the junk in this file. I run it on low-res just so it's going to run pretty fast. So, TSEPs works with complex art. It works with files that would be really hard to separate, if not impossible to separate in Corel or Illustrator. And these SEPs are not CMYK. You know, the world, I get artists that sometimes will say, well, I don't need your program. I can do it all in Photoshop. It's just CMYK. Well, that's an artist who doesn't know T-shirt printing. That's an artist who came out of art school and the world taught him that it was all CMYK. And he gets into the T-shirt shops and discovers that some of the great prints he sees for Disney, NASCAR, and Harley, those are 8 or 9 colors, 10 colors. I talked to a guy yesterday in El Salvador who was he's an old friend. He said, yeah, we do about 1 million shirts a month, and his customers are Kohl's and Macy's, and he's got an 18-color press that he says he keeps running 24 hours a day. So for some of you, that kind of rules out that kind of stuff, but you know, why do you need 18 colors? Well, if you see some of the kit shirts hanging in Sears or wherever, you see you've got 2 or 3 special effects, some glitters, some foil, you've got lots of spot colors, and when you have an 18-color press, you can print as many colors as you want. TSEPs' beauty is you can do most designs with 6 colors, frankly. And it, again, tells you the mesh count, the print order, and you're going to take jobs you would turn down. I mean, this is what it's all about. For many of you, if you have a DecoNext site, you know, you've got the stock clip art, and you're going to get a customer that's going to say, that's really cool, but here's a picture of mom or my son in Iraq, and you know what? You bring it into Corel Draw, you can't separate it. It's going to be CMYK. You bring it into Photoshop and T-Steps, and you push a button, and now you've got the thing separated. So what kind of artwork do we need? Any file that Photoshop will open works. So Photoshop will not open a CDR file, won't open a Corel file. It just says we don't like Corel, they're the competition, so it won't open a CDR, but it will open an EPS, an AI, a PSD, a TIFF, a JPEG, anything Photoshop will open, and you can run with T-Steps because T-Steps is a Photoshop plugin. If you're in Corel, the easy way is export the file as an EPS file. This is not a vector program. If you're new to Photoshop, by the way, you need to take a look at it. And again, don't let your eyes glaze over. It is what it is. It's the 80-20 principle with Photoshop. You're going to use 20% of the program 80% of the time. That's the 80-20 of life. The problem is going to be the low-quality, crappy files that they give you. The picture of mom, and mom's picture is pretty old, and maybe it came from a little 2x2, you know, wallet picture that they scanned and put on the website. So here's the deal. You need to have artwork that is hopefully 300 DPI. I know that's hard to do sometimes because the customer hasn't got a clue what he's got. Let me close this file out real quick. I'm just dragging a file over from my holding area here. Hang on. This is a sample. I'm going to zoom back out now. This is a sample. This is actually from a real customer who, for some reason, gosh, I don't know. Maybe you're in the audience here, but for some reason is designing everything on his iPad. Humor me, that is beyond me. I being a professional separator and kind of an artist, I would never do it on an iPad, but this guy works on his iPad. Well, the files are 72 DPI. And I can't convince him that the files need to be 300. So I get stuff like this where, to the naked eye, if you zoom back out, it looks pretty good. It looks okay to me, but when you zoom in, you see the difference? This is 72 DPI, this is 300 DPI. A huge difference. Now the problem is at 72 DPI, when I separate this with T-Steps, T-Steps says, well, I see red, but I see pink. I see gray, I see dark gray, and it puts all kinds of artifacts because as a separation program, it's going to separate what it sees. And so it's going to give you all kinds of junk and little halos. And those of you that use separation programs now or even have T-Steps, you know, when you get done sometimes with that junky JPEG, you have all these little halos around things. Those halos came because the file was low res. Now, upsampling the file will help it. But still, you need to think about when you're building it, this is 300 DPI. Look how crisp that is. My program will love that. It'll say, wow, I can separate that. But the truth is, it is what it is. You get junky files in, no doubt about it. I get them every day as a separator. I get files all the time where the customer says, can you separate this? This is one I got a few months ago. And the customer, you know, says, wow, I think my file's pretty good. Can you separate it? First thing I do when I bring it up into Photoshop as I zoom in on it. And I'm going to zoom, zoom, zoom. And usually I'll ask the customer later after the fact, did you zoom in on that file? Did you actually look at it close up? And what you're going to see when you zoom in is all these little things here that are called artifacts. When you make a file a JPEG, there's different quality levels, and typically people make a file a low-quality JPEG so the file's small, so it works fast on their website, and they can email it to somebody, and they're real happy that the file went from 20 megs down to 500 kilobytes. But what they did was they junked the file up. So now we see that this file is not only junky, but it's soft, very, very soft. Now, the truth is, at the end of the day, I could run this through T-Steps, and T-Steps would separate it, and I could take a little bit of what's called the tone curve, and I'll show it to you in a second. I could make it a little higher contrast. I can improve the sharpness a little bit, and at the end of the day, it's probably going to be a acceptable T-shirt print that says Black History Inspired, and it's got the pictures of the people on it, and everybody's going to be happy. But we know we could do better. Well, I've been doing so many Bob Marley separations. Like, you know, they released the little movie about Marley, and I'm doing so many Bob Marleys, and my separation life revolves around the Avengers and Disney stuff. But you can see that if you look at the file zoomed out, you can't look at it this way. You've got to zoom in and take a look at the file. So there's no magic here. TSEPs will separate what it sees. And so that's your dilemma, is going to be that you're going to get bad artwork in. And I'm going to show you in a second how to tweak some artwork and make it a little better and try and improve the artwork. Don't be afraid to fix it, by the way. Don't be afraid to kind of just dig into it. You know, the customer hasn't got a clue what he gave you. He brought you the file. He got it from somebody else. He doesn't have a clue. You can't bust his chops. He's just going to give you the artwork and figure you're going to either tell him yes or no. And I've been known to do separations where I probably, with my better judgment, should have said, no, I don't want to do it. But knowing that it's T-shirt printing and it's kind of forgiving. Let's look at Photoshop again. I'm going to remove this file real quick and close this out. This is a file I got years ago from a Fast Films user. And I've used this in seminars, so if you've taken my workshops before, you've seen this file. This customer's complaint was my program didn't do a very good job on the faces. And I kind of go, well, because from a distance, you know, you zoom back on it, and well, you think you can see the detail, but you zoom in on it. I said, well, did you zoom in on it? And he said, of course not. And I said, well, zoom in on that file and tell me if there's any detail in the faces. So you also see all these artifacts. These are all these artifacts. This is that junk that when you make a file a JPEG. And when you separate this in TSEPs, TSEPs says, I see different colors here. I see dark blue. I see light blue. I'm going to separate that. So that's the problem with separation programs and the customer's expectations. You'll get TSEPs and you run a program on it, you run a routine on a bad file, and you call me and say, wow, it picked up all kinds of junk. And my response will be, what? Did you zoom in on it and see that the junk was there to begin with? Anyway, let's do this. Let's just check the resolution. Image size. You must know the resolution. If you call me and tell me you've got a problem file, I will first off ask you, do you know the resolution? And if you say you don't know, I'm going to bust your chops and say you need to know the resolution. It is what it is, but you need to know what it is. So this file you can see physically is very small, and the resolution is very low. I'm going to upsample this. Now, upsampling doesn't perform miracles, but it'll help a lot. We want to get rid of all these jaggies. I'm going to upsample this. And it's going to zoom us into the file, so I'm going to have to zoom back out now. Now I'm going to zoom in on it. Now, it's still junky, but better, less jagged. So you want to always know the file resolution, image size, upsample it to 300 dpi at the final physical size. You don't want to miss that. And sometimes the file will come in, especially if you're an international user, you're coming as centimeters. I'm showing you 300 dpi as in pixels. You'll make it 300 centimeters, pixels per centimeter, and that file is huge. Make sure and check whether it's centimeters or inches and make sure that you're looking at the right size here. So fixing bad artwork is very important. Now, again, you can't be shy. I'm going to pull up another one. You'll get artwork in that's really dull. And these are samples that I have used for years from real customers who sent me files saying, I have a problem with this file. This customer's problem was the file printed really dull on the shirt. And what was my response to him? Well, the file's pretty dull to begin with. My program separated what it saw. Sometimes people look at the artwork and think, well, this is what the artwork is, but the sets are going to be much brighter. No, separation programs separate what they see. But this file could be fixed real easily. There's a place you're going to go a whole lot when you're in Photoshop. And again, remember the 80-20 principle. There's going to be some controls you use all the time, and then there's going to be some you never go to. This is called tone curves. And basically with tone curves, it lightens and darkens parts of the design. Right now I'm overall lightening what's called the midtone or darkening the midtone. But I could take and darken the shadow end and lighten the highlight end, that'd be the highlight, the lightest area, the shadow area. Now, this is before, this is after, before and after. I rarely leave a file untouched from when I get from customers. And I do work for high-end companies, you know, you name it, I do it, but I will always play with the artwork a little bit, just so my program will separate it better. Now, I know you want to see how TSEPs runs, but if you try TSEPs and give it a crappy piece of art, you're going to be disappointed. I want to make sure you're aware that you got to really take some time and look at the artwork. Know what you have to work with. Know if it's junk, and if it's junk, and you know what, at least you can maybe tweak it a little bit. Now, I showed you using the tone curve. You can also sharpen a file. If I go to Filter, Sharpen, the term is Unsharp Mask. And by the way, the T-SEPS manual has a complete section on this because I know it's important that you have the file correct. So when you get T-SEPS, the manual has a whole section on how to use Photoshop and how to do exactly what I'm showing you here. So we go to Unsharp Masks. Unsharp masking sharpens areas of high contrast. It's an old camera term. Don't let that term fool you. It seems very odd. Now I'm going to just play a little bit. I'm going to have the radius at 1. That's just a standard setting, threshold about 6 or 7. And I'm going to turn off the preview. So that's not sharpened. That's sharpened. And it's hard, I think, on the monitor to see. I'm going to go to an extreme so we can see it better. That's off. That's on. You can see the difference. Now, if you sharpen it, my program is going to see all the highlight, the little spectral highlights, all the edge of the feathers here, the down, going to see that all. If I turn this off, it's soft, and T-SEPS is just going to see it soft. So you need to spend time on the artwork. I can't emphasize this enough. Spend a little time tweaking the artwork. It's going to take you 2 or 3 minutes. Wham, bam, bring it up, check the image size, check the resolution, do a little sharpening, a little tone curve to it, and it's going to be a much better separation. So we're going to improve the hue saturation. We can lighten images a little bit if they're too dark. A good example is a job I get in. Again, this is a real customer, real job. His complaint was the image, T-SEPS didn't pick up all the detail around the sun. I'm not sure if this is an eclipse or what this is. Probably an eclipse, I'm guessing. He said there was all kinds of detail. Well, I don't see much. I see some, but I don't see much. So what I did was I went to my favorite place, tone curves, and I wanted to see what I had to work with. And I just blew it out with tone curve. Wow, there was detail there. In fact, look at below the word with. There's actually some wording in the red with envy, kind of a shadow. Couldn't even see it before. That's the original, the way it came to me, and the way he separated it, and this is the way the file really looks. It's just in fact, there's actually little stuff right down here. It's just a matter of not being shy and taking a look at the file and knowing what you have to work with. This file was way too dark. He just should have taken and just lightened it a little bit just to see what we had to work with. But he assumed that T-SEPS would see all this stuff, and that's not the case. Let me close this file out real quick. So don't be afraid to play with the artwork. Now here's the rules of running separations with T-SEPS. The file must be RGB, and you're going to get files in that are CMYK. It has to be RGB, and it has to have what's called no layers. Now let's take a look at Photoshop again, and I'm going to show you what layers are. So this is the beauty of Photoshop. Photoshop allows you to build images with what's called layers, and these are layers, and it's just like in Illustrator or Corel where they're objects. And with Illustrator or Corel, you know that the objects can be clicked on, moved around, put in front of, behind, and these are all objects. I'm just going to turn them off just so you can see. In fact, this whole design, which I've been using for years, if you've come into my workshops, you probably got bored seeing this thing, but this thing came from a photograph I scanned out of a travel magazine. Because I was doing a seminar in Guatemala, and I wanted to see what was down there. This is actually in Belize, but it was close enough. They seemed to like it. And then I took some stock artwork out of my fast art collection, and this artwork happened to have a transparent background, meaning there was no background around it. You know, if you bring artwork into Corel that is vector artwork, and you export as an EPS and bring it into Photoshop, it'll end up with a transparent background. You can build it in Corel, fill it with color, give it shading, and of course in Corel it looks like it's got a white background, but it really is just an object. If you export as an EPS and bring it into Photoshop, there's no background, which means you can place it on top of an object, and now we can move it around. We can make it bigger, smaller. We can give it a shadow. This actually has a shadow because in Photoshop in the layers I gave it a shadow to give it some depth, and I can change the size, the depth of the shadow. Once you learn Photoshop, you'll just spend hours. Your spouse will go, you come to bed, no, I'm still playing with Photoshop. It's really addictive. This layer is kind of deceiving on this file because I built this myself. I actually had the bird on a separate layer. The bird was just a piece of stock artwork. I typed in the word Guatemala, so how did I get the actual bird feet in front of the word Guatemala. I actually had to take the bird and take what's called the lasso tool, and I actually had to draw around the feet and copy them to a new, I'm just doing this roughly to show you, and copy them to a new layer and place it on a new layer and put that layer in front of the word Guatemala, and then I had to what's called flatten the layers, meaning I merged these layers together so I have one layer. So it's a little deceiving when you see this, but this is what you, I tell you, when you see ads in the newspaper all day long, it's all Photoshop stuff. So Photoshop lets you build things in layers. So the problem is you have two issues. You need the fish. I moved the fish, didn't I? Yeah, they're okay behind the reptile. We'll put them back here. The problem is TSEP says I can't separate layers. And by the way, layers in Photoshop are used to build a file. Channels are used to separate. So when you're done with TSEPs, you have channel separations. Think of the channels as being the red, the green, the blue, the black, the white, the brown. Layers are used to build. People sometimes will email saying, I'm trying to separate the layers. No, you build it in layers. You separate in channels. But TSEP says I can't separate channels. I don't know what to do with it. So in Photoshop, you have to have a file that is RGB. This file is RGB, and have the file that is flattened. And I'm just going to go into the layers little pull-out menu and click on flatten image. So the rules for TSEPs are real simple. It must be RGB and it must be say background in the layers palette. Now don't get confused by this. I'm telling you, your first job will be a struggle. I deal with customers all day long. Your first job will be a little struggle. You'll call me. You'll send me a file to look at. I'll come back and tell you what routine to run. After the first job, and your customer is going to be real happy, and you'll know you could have done a little better, your second job is easier because now you're feeling comfortable with Photoshop. You realize that all this stuff in Photoshop you're never going to use. You're going to use tone curve. You're going to use what's called the dodge burn tool. You're going to work in layers a little bit. You're going to work in RGB, and it's really cake. So again, don't be blown away by that. Now, the other rules, things about TSEPs as far as the artwork is, this is where it gets a little confusing, is you need two versions of the art. One version has to have what's called a white canvas. The canvas is the non-print area. It's the shirt color, really. And one piece of artwork has to have black in the canvas area. We don't want the shirt color in the art. I get artwork all day long with a shirt color in it because the artist thought that was really cool and it would really help me out. No, the shirt color has nothing to do with the ink colors, and I've got to remove the shirt color. And it's hard if the artwork vignettes or has a soft edge. It's difficult to remove the shirt color. This design is a good example. This design vignettes out, has a little soft edge. If you had given me the shirt color, and here's what they do. I've just undid it, by the way. They'll say, oh, the shirt's going to be brown. So they'll make a layer, and they'll pick the shirt color, and then they'll flatten it, and they'll send me the file. Well, how am I going to get rid of that shirt color? Got to get rid of it some way. My response to them is, do you have it in layers? Do you have it with a transparent background? We know when there's checks, it's transparent background. That's what a guy like me wants. That's what you want if you can. But if it's a JPEG is flattened. There's no layers. So you know if you get a JPEG that if the shirt color is part of it, part of your job is to figure out how to get rid of the shirt color and actually make the two versions of the artwork that you need, which is a black version and a white version. I know it's confusing a little bit because you don't understand why you need two versions, but if you look at my computer, and this says artwork, TSEPs ready, and you look at my files, and look down below here where I'm clicking up above, but you'll see I've got a black and a white version of every piece of artwork I've got. You didn't see it earlier, but I actually loaded the black version first when I ran this Chevy, and I loaded the white version second. And so I've got a black and white of everything because that's just the way the program runs. And I'll show you why in a second. I've got a white one of that, a black one of that. So my computer is littered with black and white versions of the artwork. And all you have to do is just buy into it. The problem is that for TSEPs to make an underbase, it has to make a negative of this file. And so the problem is going to be, if I make a negative of this file, I'm going to be printing a white square around the image, because if I make a negative of this to make an underbase, if I make it into what's called grayscale, black and white, and I make a negative of this, that's my film. The car's going to look great. If I put white ink on the screen and maybe put it on a 230 mesh and put this on a black shirt, that car is going to look just like that. except I'm going to be printing white around it because I made a negative of it, and now that is black, and that burns on the screen, and it's going to be printing white ink. So the problem is going to be I need a version of the artwork with black around it, so when I make a negative of it for the underbase, and T-Steps does a lot more than just make a grayscale. It adds colors in, it tweaks areas of the design. If I want it to look like that on a black shirt, that's what my film will look like. And that's why I need a black version. The black version is only used if you're going to be printing a white base or a white highlight. If you're not going to be printing a white base or a white highlight, then you don't need a black version. But the minute you want to go on any shirt that requires white, you need a version of the shirt with the image with black around it, not shirt color. Then you need a version of the image with white around it, because this is what T-Steps use to pull the colors. It's going to pull the blue, the red, the black. It's going to pull all the colors, and the reason we can't have black around this is because we need to pull black as a color. And so T-Steps uses this version to pull the color. So what I typically will do, if I can get a file in layers, and that's not always possible. If I get a file in layers, I'll make a white layer and a black layer. I will duplicate this file. And I know if you're new to Photoshop, I'm going real fast, and hopefully you'll grasp the big picture. It's not so bad. Once you get T-Steps installed and you push a few buttons and you kind of play around, it becomes real second nature. But I just duplicated this file, and I will now flatten the image. And I will save this as my white version. I'll go back to my layers version. I will turn off that layer, turn the black layer on, and I will flatten that. And now I've got my black and white versions. Now, sometimes you'll get a piece of artwork in that doesn't have the black or white. It's a JPEG. Let's just take a look at this. Let's say you got that piece of artwork in, and that's all you got. Now, this is a PSD, but let's just pretend it's a JPEG, meaning there's no layers. You could take what's called the magic wand and select around the image, and then go Edit, Fill, and fill that with black. So when you have a hard edge graphic, it's cake. It's easy. It's when you have a soft edge graphic, it's a little harder. Maybe you require a little airbrushing, a little playing with it. For some of you, that'll be the hard part, is just making the artwork correct. So you need two versions of the art, and again, this is often the hardest part. And the artwork should be at 300 dpi, if possible, at the final physical size, if possible. Because sometimes it'll be 300 dpi at 6 inches, and you want to try and get it to the right size, so you'll upsample it. So in T-Steps, you've got lots of routines. It's kind of overwhelming. I need to make the menus a little less, but you've got all kinds of buttons. It just goes on and on and on. There's really only going to be a few you're going to push all the time, because some of the buttons have to do with help, technical support, little tips on how to mask. We call that masking around the image, putting the black around it. Tips on running the program, scanning tips. These are all tips. So a lot of this has help built into the program. There's a good routine for upsampling an image. There's a good routine for improving a JPEG, because the JPEGs will sometimes have those boxes in them, and this routine will help improve the JPEG. So some of these buttons you'll only use occasionally. There's routines for sharpening the image. But the main routine you're going to be running is called Simulated Process Color. Simulated is not CMYK. It's where the design is somewhat photorealistic. This is simulated. This is a job I did for Vastex, who printed this at the recent Atlantic City ISS show. This is called Simulated Process Color. That'll be your main routine. That's going to be where it's going to be grayscale, half tones of a grayscale. And so that's going to be your main routine. T-Steps also does real process color, real CMYK. Like this job is actually, I had this up just to show you layers on this. This has a lot of layers. But this is a job that if it was for a white shirt, which this was actually to be printed on our T-Jets. But if you gave me this job and said I need it on a white shirt, I would probably print this as a CMYK, only because I've got the likeness here. I've got the girl. I want to try and match her. And it's got lots of colors, and with CMYK I would probably do it, but I would also probably give you a spot orange and a spot blue. With CMYK, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, the K stands for the key color. A lot of times you'll see a great CMYK image on a shirt, and you'll look close and find out there's 3 or 4 spot colors. So I would probably make this 6 colors: CMYK, plus the spot orange, because otherwise I'm going to be making orange with magenta and yellow and maybe some cyan or the red, and I don't want to try and make that. So that's how I would do that. So T-Steps does that, by the way. It does real process color. It does what's called index color. Indexing is commonly talked about. I bet half of the separation orders I get, when I ask them what they want me to do, they always say index it. That's because they've heard the term indexing, and they've heard it's pretty cool, and I rarely index, but that's just my preference. Indexing makes the entire design into small pixels. These are not halftone dots. If we look at the actual separations here, that's the sep for the underbase. Let's zoom out. That's the underbase. If we zoom in, little tiny squares. There's the yellow, there's the royal blue, the scarlet red. It's like a puzzle. Indexing prints really nice, and indexing is easy to do, but it likes a lot of colors. This design was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 colors, although I don't print black on a black shirt. But to do it right, I should have probably picked 2 reds, 2 or 3 blues. Indexing, when you see indexing, usually it's done by the larger shops who can print 8 or 9 colors, because it likes a lot of different colors. I'm not going to show you indexing today. I just wanted to show you this design and show you what it looks like. T-Steps also does a great old photo, black and white routine, sepia tone, and which is kind of fun. It does edge effects. It does the distress look. It'll put registration targets on the images. So it has a lot of other buttons that you will use every now and then. So these are the routines that it uses. Again, I rarely do CMYK. You have to really convince me why I need to do CMYK. So what are you going to run? When you get T-Steps in, you're going to kind of look at it. Your eyes are going to glaze over for a minute. You're going to pull your file up, and you're going to not be sure which routine to run. Because I do T-Steps separations all day long, the routine I always run, I would say 99 times out of 100, I always run simulated 9 color plus 2 whites. Okay, before you freak out and go, well, I can't print 9 colors, running that routine isn't the point to print 9 colors, it's to give you choices. Let me click on that and I'll show you. I'm going to run a routine again, and I'm just going to jet by these menus. Now, hopefully you've been paying attention and you know that I told you earlier we're going to load the masked version first. I'm going to load a file that was actually built in Corel Draw. This was made in Corel, and those of you that have Corel know, well, wow, I could have done that in Corel. I don't need your program for that. Well, that's true, you don't. But T-Steps does an underbase, a highlight, puts them in the right print order. You don't have to worry about making these all into spot colors in Corel or Pantone colors and go through and recolor everything and make them all Pantones and keep it all down to 1 yellow and 1 black and 2 blues. My program does it all for you. Now, while we were talking, it ran. There's my seps. I know, way more than you want. But you know what? Is there any green in this design? I don't see any green. I'm going to delete the green channel. Is there any gray? Yes, and I might print the gray if I can. If I have enough heads, I might print the gray. So we'll leave the gray alone. Is there any brown? There's no brown. I could have run this as the 5 color, but I opted to run it as the 9 because the 5 color would have given me the 2 blues, the red, the yellow, and the black. But I opted to run it this way just to show you that it gives you lots of choices. Now, on a black shirt, let's look at it. And again, do this in Corel this fast. There's the underbase for a black shirt. There's the yellow. There's the red. There's the dark blue, the light blue, the highlight white. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Don't print black ink on a black shirt. Let's change the shirt color to white. Well, let's change it to something off-white. Let's make it like a sand color. Now, why does it look so weird? Because the black is turned off. Let's put the black on. There's the black. Done. Finish. Now, because I'm a professional separator, I know that I really want it to be a little brighter. I know that the red could probably be brighter. I'm going to select the red channel. I'm going to go to my favorite place, tone curves. We were there earlier. I'm going to pop it. I'm going to use my judgment. I'm going to look at it on the monitor. T-Steps displays it the way it prints. We have told T-Steps, Photoshop, in what's called color settings, and this is in the manual, that to display any spot color channels and gray channels with dot gain of 30%. That means it's going to display it the way it prints. And so I need to make sure it looks correct here, because if I burn the screens correctly and print it correctly, this is how it's going to look. Now the blue, again, I might do the blue. I'm going to do a shortcut to tone curve. That's Control-M on a PC. Just going to pop that blue a little bit. Now the gray might help the front. See the gray is very slight. Watch the front of the car. The gray is real subtle. If I had one other station, I might print the gray. It's easier to print gray than to make the gray with halftones of black. And so if I really want to control the print a little better at press, I might print the gray. But if I can't print the gray, I'll dump the gray. And of course on a white shirt, I don't print the underbase or a highlight. So on a white shirt, this is now, I print on this shirt, I need the underbase. But I wouldn't print the highlight. It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 colors. Finished, done, ready to go. Now, typically what I'll do is I'll go in and this is the sequence. I'll put this as number 1. That way when the films print out, this will print on the films. And TSEPS prompts you and helps you to know what mesh counts to use. It has a help screen that is outputting simulated process. And if I click on that, it's just a help screen. It tells you should output at 55 line for the halftone, 25-degree angle for the halftone dots. And it tells you under screening that I would probably put this, believe it or not, humor me, on a 305 mesh. I know. Some of you are going, well, I use 110 for everything. I use 156. Well, your prints are probably feeling pretty heavy. But Scott says if you can go on a 305, now you could do a 230. I'd be okay with that. But if you're going to be on a fine halftone and you want the print to feel nice and soft, you go on the high mesh count. I'll change these real quick because I want this to print on the films. These are called the channel headers. These actually print on the films. So you can see the power is we could build a design in Corel and not worry at all about how we're going to separate it in Corel. Put that aside. Don't worry about making them all spot color, Pantone colors in Corel. Export as an EPS. It comes in with a transparent background as an EPS out of Corel or Illustrator. And open it up and make your black and white versions on your layers, make your 2 copies of the art, and push a button and run TSEPS on it. Now, for the tweaks, sometimes I'll get artwork in from customers that say I ran a routine and it didn't do very good, and I'll look at it and I'll go, well, did you tweak it? And they'll come back with, I didn't know I could do that. And I kind of go, wow, there's only 25 online videos that show you how the program works, and they all talk about tweaking. The manual talks about tweaking. Don't be shy. It is really hard to take a design with lots of colors and make it work with plastisol ink. It's hard to make it work. I mean, we're not CMYK, so we're just trying to make this whole thing work with off-the-shelf, out-of-the-bucket regular plastisol, and it's difficult to do. So you tweak. You look at a color and go, well, the green isn't quite right. As an example, TSEPS green is kind of a little darker green, and so typically if I have a lot of green in design, I'll check it, and sometimes the green will be more of a fluorescent green. See the difference? You can actually see it on screen as I'm doing the changes. So sometimes you have to change the green to what is the green in the artwork. The channel has the information on it, has all the green information. It's just a matter of putting the right color here. And then if we do that, we can actually have Photoshop tell us the nearest Pantone match, because here's the Photoshop color picker. If I click on color libraries, now it doesn't do a very good job of matching it. It actually needs to probably end up finding this green right here. And that's a little flaw in Photoshop. It won't quite always match the color in the artwork with the actual color you want to have it be. So the problem is going to be trying to make images with lots of colors work. So don't be shy about doing tweaks. So we're done separating. Now we have to output the halftone dots. This is actually a design that was done years ago by a company called Calico Screen Printing up in Washington. One of my early users. This is a 6-color job on a manual press. 6 colors on a manual press. It's a great print. It's a soft print. I show it at trade shows. But if we were to zoom in really close, we'd see that every color is halftone dots. If you're new to halftone dots, that's a close-up of halftone dots. And the dots are big or small depending on if it's going to be a highlight area or a shadow area in design. So we have to somehow convert the file to halftone dots. So here's the issue with Photoshop. These are called channel separations. Anything with an eye on it prints in Photoshop. So we'll put the eye in the underbase. Oops, I'm on the other file. I pulled the file off the screen here, and that's what I'm doing. So we'll put the eye in the underbase. That's going to print. That's my underbase. If I go to File, Print, Photoshop loads the print window. It's thinking about it. And I'm in CS4, and in CS4 I can say put registration marks. I need to change the I'll change the page setup so we can see it here. and I'll tell it, I didn't see what size that file was, but it's probably going to work on a, hang on. I'm looking for a 13 by 19. There we go. So it's going to look right here. We can say to Photoshop put registration targets on it. It's really close. This file is actually probably almost 13, and there's no margin, and Photoshop's not real happy that there's no margin. I can say put labels right there, which is the channel header. So on that film, it's going to say 1 dash, and I think I made that 305. I should have made that 230 for the underbase. I was not thinking clearly. And they'll say that it's the underbase white. So in CS4, there's a button called Screen. Click on that, and I can tell it for the underbase, make it a 55-line halftone, 25-degree angle, elliptical dot shape. And don't fight me on this. Just humor me and trust me. This is how it works. And the dot shape is correct. The line count's good. The angle's perfect for no moire patterns on your screens. So you change them all. I'm not going to do them all right now, but you change them all. In CS5 and CS6, they removed the screen button. Adobe says nobody prints out of Photoshop. And the 100,000 screeners or more worldwide that use Photoshop are saying, are you kidding me? We've been printing out of Photoshop for years. And Adobe says, we ain't putting it back in. So when I got the beta of CS6, I was excited to see if they put the screen button back in. They didn't. Now, the way it is now, I have told Photoshop to print to my RIP, which is called T-RIP. An inkjet printer does not do halftone dots. Inkjet printers are a dumb device that doesn't know what a halftone dot is. And so if you print to an inkjet printer now, you're going to get grayscale. You have to convert the file to halftone dots, and that is the purpose of what's called a RIP. A RIP is a raster image processor that converts files to halftone dots. There's lots of RIPs out there. You've got AccuRip, Quick Rip, Filmmaker, T-RIP. They all do about the same thing. They also tell an inkjet printer to lay more ink down. So an inkjet printer that you can get a Epson 1400, that's what this is in this picture, for about $200 online if you can find it. That's 13 by 19. The 1430 has replaced it. That's available from Staples and almost anywhere for $250, 13 by 19. You put a RIP with it, and now it's going to print out beautiful, dense black films that have great halftone dots. So the problem is you need a RIP of some sort. Now, TSEPS has built into it what I kind of call a poor man's RIP. Where it's called convert to halftone dots. Now, a RIP's function is also to tell the inkjet printer to lay more ink down. They don't want to lay down much ink. They're designed for minimal amounts of ink and minimal amount of black. And so a RIP tells the printer to lay more ink down, do more passes of the head, do a bigger dot, and so the RIP is the magic for getting dense films. But you can convert a file without a RIP in Photoshop using TSEPS right here, and your file on the screen will be halftone, and it'll be ready to print out to any printer, but again, you have no control over the ink deposit. As an example, if you like that, and this is built into TSEPS for free, I have a little program that I wrote to replace the screen button, frankly, called the TSEPS Halftone Converter. And this is really designed for CS5 and CS6. It's kind of a poor man's RIP. It'll convert to halftones now, and then if you print it to your RIP will control the ink deposit. But you say convert it, it asks you what your dot shape's going to be, asks you what your line count is, and your angle, and it converts every file on screen in channel to individual files that are pre-halftoned. Hey, my room monitor's here. Can I go over by a few minutes? Marco, Brendan?
Yeah, we started probably about 5. Oh, can you hear me?
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, I can hear you. Are we okay with that?
Sorry. Yep, that's fine, Scott.
Okay, all right. I didn't know if there was a definite, if I had to be done here at, definitely 1 hour.
Oh, we just charge
So I took and I just charge more money. Yeah, there you go. So I took the channel separation that TSEPS did. I ran it through the halftone converter, which is about $70 US. That's a real cheap little, just a script. And now I have files that are pre-halftoned that are ready to print to any printer or to a RIP, because again, the RIP controls ink deposit. But what you'll find is the 1430 and 1400s lay a lot of ink down. Those are good little printers, and even though the RIP is helpful, you could print to a 1430 and not necessarily have to have a RIP. So I wrote this routine really because of the missing screen button. where you have to have the RIP dictate the angle and line count, and it's kind of a hassle. Let me close this out real quick. So what you do is you end up saving each of these files individually, and they're already named. The Halftone converter takes the channel header name and calls the file that name. That's the key thing, because otherwise if you split channels in Photoshop and say split my whole design apart into individual files, you lose the channel header. It becomes file 1, file 2, file 3, file 4, and you want that channel header information. So your job is, once you get T-steps and do a great set of separations, is to not screw it up. Most jobs can be done on a 6-color manual. That's not to say that some jobs can't, where it's a lot of Pantone colors, a lot of matches, picky customer. You all know that your nightmare customer is an artist who has a piece of art and he wants it on shirts. And, you know, he's your nightmare customer. I deal with these guys all the time, and I always joke with them, you're going to be my pickiest guy because they want every little shade to be there. But so the screen making process is very important. You're going to output a great set of films off of your RIP and your inkjet printer, and you're going to go make screens, and you're going to be on high meshes, and you've got to hold the actual dots on that screen. That's a close-up of a screen. And what you're going to do is you're going to call me and tell me that all the light areas of your design are gone, and T-steps didn't catch them. And I'm going to tell you, compare your film to your screen, and you're going to come back and say, wow, we didn't hold all those dots. And so the problem is, if you're used to burning screens like, let's say, a 305, if you're used to burning like a 156 for 2 minutes, as just an example, for a 305, you might go 30 seconds for your exposure time. And it's a fight I deal with every day, is trying to convince screen makers that you can go lower for high mesh counts. And because the thread is thinner, the emulsion coating is thinner, and you've got to hold those dots. This is my mantra when I do seminars, is hold those dots. Hold the dots on the film, hold the dots on the screen, and hold those dots on the shirt, and your print will look like what you saw on the monitor. So it's very, very important. Let's do one last quick little set of steps, just to rehash this one more time. I'm going to close this file out. I've got some other files open, which is why you're seeing stuff in the channels palette. Let's do one more quick, just so you can see how fast it is. 9-color, let's see, sample files. And again, I don't want to print 9, but this design is only for a black shirt. So I'm going to load the same file twice, because this file only has a black background, because it's only going to be on a black shirt. I don't need black ink, and I will load the same file twice. I just got this file about an hour ago. I got it just before we went online. This is actually a file for an event that I'm sponsoring in Nashville, Tennessee, called The Gig, which is for digital artists and garment imagers getaway. And this is my seller commercial. But the point of this whole thing is, I'm going to be doing a 2-day high-end color separating class at this, and it's called The Gig, because we're going to encourage you to bring your guitars and harmonicas and instruments, and we're going to have a jam room, because you'd be real surprised how many screen printers play. And we're going to try and form some bands and have a little fun at night. And it's going to be in Nashville. We're going to have seminars on screening, sublimation, every process with a heavy emphasis on computer graphics, how to build designs in Illustrator and Photoshop, how to do separations, the tricks that I do, because I do separations every day, and I hate to lie to you and say that every job is a slam dunk. Sometimes I'll spend a couple of hours tweaking when it's a 15-color image. I just got one in yesterday that was for the movie Cars, and with all those cartoon characters, and I've got to nail it, and they can print all the colors that they want, but I'm going to spend some time on that. So here's our original artwork. Your dilemma is going to be sometimes flesh tones. That's why I brought this up. Let's see how it looks like first. Okay, not bad. I don't print black on a black shirt. Throw that away. I don't need the gray. Throw that away. I got the green in her little dress there. I'll probably leave that. I know I don't need the purple. Throw that away. But I got the flesh. It'll be okay, but the flesh is made up right now of yellow and red. And I know that at press, if I'm too heavy on my red screen, that red's going to really overpower it. T-steps has an optional routine. This is where all the rest of these buttons are. And one of them is optional flesh and brown. Click on that, and it's going to pull a Caucasian flesh, 2 shades of brown, and orange. Because a lot of times there's lots of orange in fleshes. And it's going to give you some choices. That's way more than you want to print. Let's take a look at this thing Oops, I'm sorry. Let's just see what happens if I put the flesh on. Now, it pulled a lot of flesh in her jacket. It pulled flesh in the wording because it finds any area that's kind of like a light beige. So it's more than I want. But what I would do typically would be I'd say, I like what's on her face, though, and I'll show you in a second why I like it. I'm just going to highlight real quickly. I'm using what's called the lasso tool. I'm just doing this quick. And I'm just going to delete what's around her just to show you. And if I put the flesh up before the red, remember it displays on the monitor the way it's going to print. Now I'm going to put the red on that flesh to give her that cheek tone. Give her a little shading in the cheeks. If I take the red off, you see what I'm saying. Now I know the flesh is going to print well because making flesh from yellow and red is hard to control at press because if your red is too heavy, she's going to go sunburn on you. But now I'm actually printing flesh as a color. So it has lots of options. And when you get the demo of the program, you're going to look at all these options. Eyes are going to glaze over, but it really gives you lots of options here. So as observations, TSEPS takes you to a new level. And you know, it sounds like a sales pitch, but I hear it all the time. TSEPS been out for almost 12 years. When I go to the mall, what I get jazzed about, and my wife will tell you, I have to call her over to the rack. I love that there's colors back. I see so much less, at least in the U.S. and Arizona, I see so many less skulls and crossbones and affliction. I see lots more color. And I know by the separations I'm doing, I haven't done a skull or wings in months. And I'm pleased that we're seeing now lots of colors back. Of course, in the U.S., what are the hot colors now? I'm seeing way too much safety yellow and orange. With TSEPS, you'll never say you can't do it. You'll take every job that comes in the door. It'll work even on simple jobs built in Corel and AI. I could have given this TSEPS a simple 2 or 3 color out of Corel that had shading and gradations, and it would have built an underbase for it. It would have worked perfectly. It's perfect for Deco Network users where you're going to be getting those crappy JPEGs as their custom artwork. They're going to bring it up onto the online designer, and they're going to think it looks so cool, so small, and then it's going to be, when you bring it up, it's going to be this junky JPEG. Well, TSEPS will separate that stuff. And so to me, if you have DecoNet, you really need to be aware that it's easy to look at the clip art and go, well, that's really cool, but people are going to send you their junky JPEGs. A good example is, years ago, I sold Cafe Press some of their first DTG printers, and I sold Zazzle. These are the online guys that are doing it with DTG, direct-to-garment. Zazzle had a bunch of our machines, and Zazzle, 80% of the files they got were crappy JPEGs. And they had little routines that did what I showed you earlier, how to subsample them, how to get rid of some of the artifacts, but the majority of their files were crappy JPEGs. And so that's where TSEPS just shines. So even a marginal printer can do color shirts. I hear it all the time, printers that were just doing ink slapping for years, and they moved to TSEPS, and all of a sudden they're doing great stuff. And if you've been to any of my seminars before, you know that my rap is, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And my name is Scott Fresener. Be free to send me an email. Just don't inundate me with questions, but send me email, send me questions. I'm going to hand it back over to Marco and Brendan, and thank you guys for inviting me to help out today.
Yeah, no, thank you, Scott. Wow, a lot of information. Appreciate it. A lot of people hung out. Scott, we did go over a little bit, so if they have questions, as you said, they can give you a call or send you an email. Folks, that does conclude our presentation. Thank you again, Scott. Really quick, if you want to get a hold of us or Scott, for us, it's www.deconetwork.com. We've got a toll-free number of 855-DECO-NETWORK. So if you have any questions about signing up for Deco Network, or questions about what it does and will it work for you, and questions about the affiliate sites or any of the SEO stuff that Brendan was talking about early on, please feel free to give us a call. Love to talk to you on that. If you want to reach Scott and his team, his website is T-BizNetwork.com. His phone number is right there. It's 480-212-1078. Also, we'd like to ask you to follow us on Twitter at Deco Network, like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Deco Network, and then follow our blog. If you get a chance, go to our blog, deconetwork.com. You can actually sign up for our blog. It's free. It's on the far right-hand side. If you scroll about a third of the way down, you'll see it. It says sign me up. Definitely do that. It's a great way for us to be able to communicate with you and then also inform you of all these wonderful and exciting webinars to come. And hopefully, Scott, I'm going to twist your arm, see if we can get you to do maybe another one here in the future. So thank you, Scott, for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
thanks for your time. Appreciate everything, okay?
Thanks, guys. Take care of yourselves.
All right, Scott. Everybody, have a great afternoon and enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.